Right now, somewhere in the mountains of Sinaloa, a man worth hundreds of millions of dollars cannot sleep. He has not slept properly in months. He rotates safe houses every few days. He trusts almost nobody. Not his bodyguards, not his financial operators, not even members of his own family. Every knock on a door is a threat. Every unfamiliar car rolling down the street could be the last thing he ever sees as a free man. His name is Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar. And the walls are closing in. Think about what it took to get here. El Chapo, his father, most famous drug lord in history, is rotting in a supermax cell in Colorado. A man who escaped maximum security prison twice and still ended up destroyed by the system. El Mayo Zambada, who ran the Sinaloa cartel quietly for 40 years without ever being arrested, was lured onto a private plane and landed in handcuffs on American soil. El Mencho, the most feared cartel boss of a generation. The man the DEA called more dangerous than El Chapo, gone. Rafael Caro Quintero, the legend who ordered the murder of a DEA agent and ran free for decades, captured and extradited. And that is not even counting his brothers. Ovidio, arrested in a military operation in January 2023 and sitting in a federal cell in Chicago right now. Joaquin, the one who betrayed El Mayo and handed him to the Americans, also in custody, going through court procedures, one by one, every single one. And now Ivan Archivaldo, the last one standing, knows that his name is next on that list. Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar was not supposed to be the last man standing. He was supposed to be untouchable, the eldest son of El Chapo, backed by the most powerful drug trafficking organization in the Western Hemisphere, commanding sicarios across multiple states, sitting at the top of a fentanyl empire worth billions. For a long time, that is exactly what he was. But here is what really went down. The same world that gave him that power has now been completely dismantled around him, and the United States government, which has been building a case against him for over a decade across multiple federal districts, is not stopping until it has him in a cell. To really understand how this story ends, we have to go back to where it started, to the mountains of Sinaloa, to a boy growing up in the shadow of the most wanted man on the planet. Let's rewind. Ivan Archivaldo was born in 1983, the son of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman and his first wife, Alejandrina Salazar Hernandez. Unlike his father, who grew up in genuine poverty in the Sierra Mountains and clawed his way into the drug trade one step at a time, Ivan was born into royalty. His father was already building the infrastructure that would eventually become the most powerful cartel on earth. Ivan did not have to earn his place. It was handed to him by bloodline. Growing up, Ivan and his full brother, Jesus Alfredo, known as El Mochomito, were constantly around cartel operations. They visited their father in La Palma prison and later in Puente Grande, where El Chapo was treated by guards more like a guest than an inmate. Seeing their father hold power even behind prison walls, shaped both of them in a deep way. Power in this world was not just about freedom. It was about fear and loyalty and money, and El Chapo had all three even in a cell. That lesson stuck. When El Chapo escaped from Puente Grande prison in 2001 hidden in a laundry cart, the Guzman family's status only grew. By the mid-2000s, Ivan was already operating in his father's shadow, moving money, managing relationships, learning the business from the inside. In February 2005, that first chapter ended fast when Zapopan Municipal Police arrested him in Guadalajara while he was sitting in a car. They caught him waiting on an associate. The arrest led to money laundering charges and time inside La Palma, the same maximum security prison his father had once ruled from the inside. The apple did not fall far from the tree. El Chapo posted the bail. Federal police rearrested him before he could walk out. The government sentenced him to 5 years in 2008, but Ivan successfully appealed the verdict and walked free that same year. For a man connected to the most powerful trafficking operation in the world, The legal system was just another obstacle to navigate around. That early experience taught him something his brothers would need to learn the hard way years later, that the system can be beaten, but only until it cannot. By 2012, the United States Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control had already designated Ivan Archivaldo under the Kingpin Act, naming him a lieutenant of El Chapo. That same year, the indictment started building in American federal courts. 2013 brought a grand jury indictment out of San Diego, charging him alongside El Mayo Zambada himself. The Americans were not treating him like a footnote. They were treating him like a primary target. Here is where it gets crazy. By 2016, Ivan Archivaldo was at the height of his confidence. El Chapo had been recaptured and was going through the Mexican legal process before his eventual extradition. The cartel still ran like a machine, and Ivan decided to celebrate his 33rd birthday at one of the most upscale restaurants in Puerto Vallarta, La Lech, a spot in the tourist zone where celebrities dine and wealthy Mexican society mingles. He brought his brother Jesus Alfredo. He brought 4 other associates. He was comfortable. He was untouchable. Then the Jalisco New Generation cartel walked in. In broad daylight, CJNG gunmen kidnapped Ivan Archivaldo, his brother Jesus Alfredo, and the 4 people with them right out of that restaurant. No cap, in the middle of a tourist zone. In front of witnesses, El Chapo's sons were snatched up. It was one of the most brazen acts of cartel aggression in recent memory. The following week, both the DEA and the Guzman family confirmed that Ivan and Alfredo had been released. The terms were never made public, but the message from CJNG was clear. Nobody was untouchable. That kidnapping was a turning point. After El Chapo was extradited to the United States in January 2017 and eventually convicted in 2019, Ivan and his brothers had a choice to make: retreat into obscurity or step up and take the wheel. They stepped up, hard. Ivan and Jesus Alfredo took command of the Chapitos faction of the Sinaloa cartel. Their half-brothers Ovidio and Joaquin were also involved. Together, Los Chapitos made a generational shift in how the cartel operated. El Chapo's era had been built on cocaine, corruption, and tunnels. The Chapitos pivoted aggressively into synthetic drugs, specifically fentanyl. They built clandestine labs in Culiacan, brought in chemical precursors from China, and created a pipeline that the DEA would later describe as the most prolific fentanyl trafficking operation in the world. They were not just maintaining their father's empire, they were growing it into something new. This is important because the fentanyl operation is precisely what made the Americans so aggressive in building the legal case against them. Every year that Los Chapitos expanded that pipeline, tens of thousands of Americans were dying from overdoses. The political pressure from Washington on federal prosecutors to dismantle this network was enormous. But while the operation grew, so did the narco-influencer era. Los Chapitos had a brand. They posted on social media: luxury cars, designer clothes, exclusive parties, weapons that looked like props from an action movie. Their associates became the digital faces of the cartel's lifestyle aspirations. They were not hiding, they were broadcasting. And that visibility became one of the things that made them so identifiable and so exposed to intelligence gathering. Then came October 17, 2019, the Battle of Culiacan. Mexican security forces arrested Ovidio Guzman Lopez in the city. Within hours, the Chapitos mobilized hundreds of armed men in armored vehicles across the city. Rocket launchers, military-grade weapons, convoys seizing entire neighborhoods. Soldiers were taken hostage. Military family housing complexes were surrounded. The chaos was so total, so overwhelming, that President Andrés Manuel López Obrador made the call to release Ovidio rather than let the city burn. The Chapitos had just forced a government to surrender. For a minute, That looked like peak power. It was actually the beginning of the end. The American government watched the Battle of Culiacan and drew one conclusion: these men needed to be taken off the board permanently. In April 2023, a federal grand jury in the Northern District of Illinois issued a sweeping indictment against all four Chapitos brothers: Ivan Archivaldo, Jesus Alfredo, Ovidio, and Joaquin. The charges covered everything from leading a continuing criminal enterprise to fentanyl importation conspiracy, machine gun possession, in furtherance of drug trafficking, and conspiracy to commit murder. This was not a narcotics case. This was a war. That same month, the Southern District of New York returned a separate indictment against Ivan specifically, stacking charges from a completely different federal jurisdiction. By this point, Ivan Archivaldo had indictments across California, Illinois, and New York. Multiple federal agencies were working the case simultaneously. There was a dedicated DEA tip email posted publicly on the government's reward page. This was a man the entire machinery of United States federal law enforcement had locked onto. Then in January 2023, Ovidio was arrested in a massive military operation in Culiacan, the kind of operation that required more than 1,000 soldiers to execute precisely because the Chapitos had demonstrated in 2019 that any smaller force would get overwhelmed. This time, the Mexican government committed fully and did not back down. Ovidio was extradited to Chicago in April of that year. He would plead guilty to drug trafficking charges by July 2025. Fast forward to July 25, 2024. Joaquin Guzman Lopez, the same brother who had stood side by side with Ivan for years, boarded a small plane in Mexico. He had made a deal with the Americans. On that same flight was Ismael El Mayo Zambada, the co-founder of the Sinaloa cartel, who later claimed publicly that he had been kidnapped and forced onto that plane without his knowledge or consent. Whether that is true or not, the result was the same. El Mayo landed in El Paso in handcuffs, and Joaquin went into federal custody, ready to cooperate. Think about what that moment meant for Ivan Archivaldo specifically. In one day, his half-brother had cooperated with the American government, the man who knew the inner workings of Los Chapitos, who knew the routes, the contacts, the financial structures, the code names, was now in a room talking to federal prosecutors. Whatever Joaquin told them, and he was certainly telling them things, went directly into the case files against Ivan. And then there is what happened on August 29, 2024. Reports surfaced that Mexican military personnel had captured Ivan Archivaldo on the outskirts of Culiacan. The reports circulated across Mexican media. If it was real, it was over. If it was not, and the Mexican government never officially confirmed it, it still showed how close the net had gotten. Close enough that a credible report could circulate for days without definitive denial. By September 2024, Ivan's chief of security, a man known as LPE, who had replaced the previously arrested El Nini in that role, was taken down in Culiacan along with 6 armed associates. His financial operator, El Güerito, followed in February 2025. His security coordinator, El Doscientos, was arrested the same week. In January 2026, his father-in-law, his brother-in-law, and his right-hand man, El Panu, the man responsible for his personal protection, were all gone. Cartel expert and journalist Jose Luis Montenegro reported that Ivan himself may have handed some of those people over after detecting betrayals and information leaks in his inner circle. That is what paranoia does to an operation. You start destroying your own people before the government can use them against you. And in doing that, you destroy the organization from within. Here is the state of play right now. Every security chief Ivan Archivaldo has had is either dead or in custody. His financial operators, the people managing where the money goes, how it moves, how it gets laundered, arrested. His brothers Ovidio and Joaquin are both in United States federal custody. His half-brother Joaquin cooperated. El Mayo is locked up. El Mencho is gone. The man who was once the center of one of the most powerful criminal organizations in human history is now, by every credible account, a man running on paranoia and declining resources. The bounty on his head tells you everything. The United States Department of State is currently offering $20 million for information leading to his arrest. $20 million. For context, when El Chapo was at his peak, the most wanted drug lord in the world, the reward for his capture was $5 million. Ivan Archivaldo's number is 4 times that. They want him that bad. But here is what money cannot fix. The United States Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, designated Ivan and the entire Los Chapitos faction under the Kingpin Act. That designation does not just freeze assets in American jurisdiction, it makes the entire global financial system effectively off-limits. No American bank will touch money connected to him. No legitimate business operating internationally can do business with anyone connected to Los Chapitos. His ability to move money through the formal economy has been aggressively squeezed. The billions generated by fentanyl trafficking still flow. But washing that money, moving it into real assets, converting it into anything legitimate, that becomes exponentially harder every year as the designations stack up and the financial intelligence apparatus tightens. And then there is the internal war eating the cartel alive. After Joaquin delivered El Mayo to the Americans in July 2024, the Sinaloa cartel split down the middle. Ivan's faction, the Chapitos, went to war with La Maíza, the faction loyal to the sons of El Mayo Zambada, led by Ismael Zambada Siqueiros, also known as Mayito Flaco. By 2025 and into 2026, that war had produced nearly 3,000 homicides across Sinaloa, 3,000 people dead in a turf war that serves at its core as a distraction and a drain on Ivan's resources, manpower, and attention at the exact moment when the federal pressure from both Mexico and the United States is at its highest point ever. The journalist José Luis Montenegro, who has sources embedded in the Los Chapitos camp, reported in early 2025 that Ivan Archivaldo no longer sleeps and is betraying those close to him in fear of them betraying him first. That is not the profile of a man in control. That is the profile of a man in collapse. Psychological evaluations from his 2005 prison stay described him as anxious, reserved, evasive, a man with sharp intelligence but low frustration tolerance, and a tendency toward violent outbursts under stress. Now apply those characteristics to a situation where his organization is being dismantled around him in real time. That is a dangerous combination. In February 2025, Mexican federal forces descended on a safe house in the Tierra Blanca neighborhood of Culiacan, specifically targeting Ivan Archivaldo. The operation was large and coordinated. According to journalist Montenegro, Ivan was in that building when the forces arrived. He knew about the operation approximately 1 hour before it went down, tipped off by his cousin Haziel Abdiel Guzman Araujo, known as El Gabacho, son of Aureliano Guzman Loera. A purported private exchange between Ivan and his cousin surfaced afterward, in which Ivan reportedly said, "Those men will not catch me today." 700 meters long, lit inside, wide enough to walk through on foot. It connected to an exit point inside another unoccupied property, where a car with tinted windows and armed escorts with rifles and grenades was waiting. Sound familiar? His father escaped from Altiplano maximum security prison in 2015 through a tunnel that stretched more than a mile. The Guzman family literally builds their escapes underground. It is a generational survival strategy. The Wall Street Journal confirmed the escape in a report published in May 2025. Mexican Security Secretary Omar Garcia Harfuch publicly denied that Ivan had escaped specifically. He said the primary targets of that operation had been El Doscientos and El Güerito, both of whom were arrested. But here's the thing. Whether the Mexican government admits it or not, the tunnel was found. The infrastructure was real, and Ivan was not arrested. Draw your own conclusions. But this is important. An escape through a pre-built tunnel with 1 hour's warning is not the operation of a man running a powerful criminal empire. It is the operation of a man on the run. The tunnel was not built after the warning came in. It had been constructed days in advance. That means Ivan Archivaldo is living in safe houses that already have escape infrastructure built into them before he even arrives. He is not moving through Culiacan the way he used to, openly with convoy escorts, throwing parties at upscale restaurants. He is rotating locations constantly, sleeping somewhere different every few days, managing operations remotely and with a shrinking circle of people he trusts. According to intelligence assessments referenced in multiple reports, Ivan now uses compartmentalized communications, meaning people in his own organization do not know what other parts of the operation are doing. He stays offline as much as possible. He moves in vehicles with tinted windows escorted by armed men and nothing else. The narco-influencer era, the social media posts, the corridos commissioned in his honor. That version of Ivan Archivaldo is dead. What remains is a fugitive managing an empire through layers of insulation, while the American government and the Mexican military methodically work through every layer. People look at the scale of Los Chapitos' drug operation and think money insulates you from everything. For real, the numbers are staggering. Federal prosecutors describe the Chapitos enterprise as generating tens of millions in revenue. The actual figure across the fentanyl and methamphetamine pipelines they control is likely in the billions annually. But here is what nobody talks about. Money that cannot move is not money. It is weight. The OFAC kingpin designations, stacking up since 2012, expanded multiple times since, mean that any financial institution anywhere in the world that processes transactions connected to Ivan Archivaldo faces United States sanctions itself. Banks do not play games with that. No European bank, no Asian bank, no Canadian bank is going to risk its access to the American financial system over cartel drug money. The informal channels, cash couriers, real estate purchases, cryptocurrency wallets, shell companies, are all under active investigation by the DEA's Financial Operations Division, the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and multiple international partners. His brothers in United States custody are now talking to prosecutors. Ovidio pleaded guilty. Joaquin is cooperating. Every plea deal, every cooperation agreement those brothers sign contains financial disclosures. Accounts, properties, business structures, asset flows. Every disclosure narrows the universe of places Ivan's money can hide. The prosecutors building the case against him know more about the financial architecture of Los Chapitos right now than they have ever known, because the people who built that architecture are sitting across from them in interview rooms. This is what the endgame looks like for men like Ivan Archivaldo. The money does not run out. The freedom to use it does. Now this is where things get real. Every major cartel leader the United States has targeted over the last 30 years has ended up in one of three places: dead, extradited, or broken inside a Mexican prison with no real power left. El Chapo, Supermax, in Florence, Colorado, serving life plus 30 years. El Mayo, federal custody, awaiting trial on charges that carry effectively a life sentence. El Mencho, captured and reportedly in Mexican custody. Rafael Caro Quintero, extradited to the United States in 2022 after decades on the run. The pattern does not lie. The list of men who successfully evaded the American federal government indefinitely is essentially empty. For Ivan Archivaldo specifically, the legal architecture already in place is catastrophic. He faces indictments across multiple federal districts. The charges include leading a continuing criminal enterprise, which under federal sentencing guidelines carries mandatory life imprisonment. The fentanyl trafficking charges, the machine gun charges, the conspiracy to commit murder charge, all of it stacks. If he is ever brought into an American courtroom, he is going to spend the rest of his life in a cell next to his father. What makes his situation unique compared to his father is that Ivan does not have the mythology that kept El Chapo bulletproof in the public consciousness for so long. El Chapo's story had a cinematic arc. The poor boy from Badiraguato, who became the most wanted man in the world, who escaped prison twice, who got interviewed by famous people. Ivan has always lived in that shadow, operating more as a coordinator and manager than a legend. The corridos exist. The culture around Los Chapitos is real. But the narrative protection his father had is not there in the same way. And as the internal war with La Maiza grinds on, as the body count in Sinaloa climbs past 3,000, the public goodwill that cartels often cultivate in their home communities through social programs and economic dependency erodes fast. You cannot maintain a narco-welfare state when you are losing a war on the streets and the government is arresting your people every month. The timeline of his inner circle's destruction makes the picture even clearer. El Nini, arrested 2023, extradited 2024. El Pilli, arrested September 2024. El Guerrito, arrested February 2025. El Doscientos, arrested February 2025. El Panu, killed 2025. His father-in-law and brother-in-law, arrested early 2026. His financial networks, under active interdiction. Every arrest that happens removes one more person who can warn him, protect him, or run interference between him and the government's reach. At some point in any fugitive's life, the circle gets small enough that the odds flip permanently. Ivan Archivaldo has not reached that point yet. He is still operating, still directing fentanyl logistics remotely, still commanding whatever remains of Los Chapitos' military structure, while the war with La Maiza continues draining manpower and resources. But the trajectory is undeniable. The American government has not closed a case file and moved on. There is a dedicated email address. There is a $20 million reward poster. There are federal prosecutors in Chicago, New York, and San Diego with his name on their active dockets. CIA operations have reportedly been involved in the hunt. The entire intelligence and law enforcement apparatus of the most powerful government on Earth has his name written in permanent ink. And he knows it. He has said it himself. Those people will not catch me today or ever. But his father said the same thing, more or less, every time he escaped. El Chapo looked at the United States government as just another obstacle, just another system to be outmaneuvered with money and tunnels and loyalty. He found out the hard way that you can outrun an institution for a decade, maybe two, but you cannot outrun it forever. Ivan Archivaldo is running the same play a generation later, with fewer resources, fewer allies, and more American intelligence directed at him than was ever directed at his father. Here is what the story of Ivan Archivaldo really tells us about this generation of cartel leadership. Los Chapitos believed they had figured something out that their father's generation had not. They built a product, fentanyl, that was so profitable, so in demand, and so devastating that it would keep the American government focused on supply reduction rather than leadership decapitation. They embraced public visibility in a way El Chapo never did in his prime. They made themselves cultural figures in music, on social media, in the streets, thinking that visibility translated to power, and for a few years, it did. But visibility works both ways. Every corrido commissioned in your name is intelligence. Every social media post by someone connected to your circle is a data point. Every narco-influencer that Mexican and American law enforcement is investigating is a thread that leads somewhere. When the United States Treasury sanctions dozens of influencers in Sinaloa, and the Financial Intelligence Unit is tracing money through digital platforms back to cartel accounts, you are not running a criminal empire anymore. You are running a traceable enterprise. The Chapitos era changed Mexican organized crime in ways that will take years to fully understand. They democratized the narco aesthetic, turned fentanyl into a mass casualty weapon, pointed at the American population, and broke the old rules of discretion and operational security that kept men like El Mayo free for 40 years. El Mayo never posted on social media. El Mayo never attended birthday parties at tourist restaurants. El Mayo ran ghost operations and survived because no one could see him. Ivan Archivaldo built an empire that was visible enough to be cultural, which made it vulnerable in ways that his father's organization never was. Now he is living in the ruins of that visibility, rotating safe houses, trusting no one, watching the people closest to him disappear one by one into custody or the ground. Nearly 3,000 people have died in Sinaloa since the internal war started. Communities that were already economically dependent on cartel activity are being torn apart by a power struggle that ultimately serves no one who lives there. Today, Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar is the last significant Chapitos figure still free. His brother Jesus Alfredo remains at large alongside him, but the Americans have both of them on the same reward poster: $20 million shared. Two men who once commanded a multi-state criminal empire and had enough firepower to make a government retreat are now two names on a bounty sheet that the United States has placed at the top of its narcotics enforcement priorities. The outcome is not in doubt. The only question is whether it ends with a tunnel that runs out of exits, a bullet from a rival faction that gets there before the government does, or a courtroom in Chicago where a federal judge reads charges that add up to life without the possibility of parole. Those are the three doors that remain. None of them lead anywhere Ivan Archivaldo wants to go. His father's story was built on escapes. This one is built on the mathematics of inevitability. The government does not forget. It does not run out of money or patience or prosecutors. And every day that Ivan Archivaldo wakes up, wherever that is, in whatever safe house he is in, the radius of places he can safely be shrinks a little more. The clock is running, and he knows it.